Hello and welcome. I'm Heidi Picoy, President of Texas PTA. On behalf of Texas PTA Board of Directors and our state office, welcome to Straight Talk 26, raising the AI generation from homework help to unforeseen risk. What every family should know, thank you for joining us. Normally, we gather at the Texas Capitol for Straight Talk. This year, due to ongoing Capitol renovations, we are just across the street at the office of Raise Your Hand Texas. We are grateful for their generosity in opening their space to us and the beautiful view of the Capitol behind us. While the location has slightly shifted, our purpose remains the same: to provide families with thoughtful, balanced information on the issues shaping public education. We're grateful to PTA members and families from across Texas who are taking time to be a part of this conversation. Whether you're watching with your local or your council PTA, or tuning in on your own, we're so glad you're here. Technology has always played a role in how our children learn and grow. Almost overnight, artificial intelligence has become part of everyday life, showing up in schools, at home, and in the tools our children uses. For many families, this brings excitement, questions, and sometimes concern. What we know for sure is families care deeply about their children's safety, well-being, learning, and the future success. When something new begins to shape those things, it's important to slow down, learn more, and talk about it together. That's why Texas PTA brought together a group of panelists with experience in education, technology, mental health, and workforce development. They will share what they're seeing, what families should be aware of, and how we can support our children as this technology continues to grow. So thank you for being here and for all that you do to support Texas students and families. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Texas PTA Vice President Advocacy, Rachel Abel, who will introduce our panelists and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm Rachel Abel, Vice President Advocacy for Texas PTA. As Heidi mentioned, this conversation matters because families are encountering AI in real time, often without a roadmap. As a mom raising 4 children across a wide range of ages, I learned that technology doesn't just change over time, it changes the experience of parenting itself. Artificial intelligence isn't entirely new. It's been building in the background for years. But recently, it feels like it's moved from something developing behind the scenes to something our kids are using every day. What once felt theoretical now shows up in homework, study tools, search engines, and everyday apps. And in many cases, students are exploring these tools at the same time or even before the adults guiding them. That's a new challenge for families. And that's exactly why programs like Straight Talk matter. This is one of the ways Texas PTA supports families by creating a space to pause, learn together, and hear from trusted voices. It's also one of the benefits of a PTA membership. Access to conversations and resources that help us navigate what's next for our kids with a little more confidence. If you're watching and you're not a PTA member yet, we'd love for you to join one, or even several, of the PTAs in your community. PTA is about more than meetings. It's about connection, shared learning, and standing together for our children. As you listen today, you'll hear different perspectives on how AI affects learning, safety, and future opportunities. And later, we'll invite you to take part in a simple Texas PTA pledge, a way for families to come together around what matters most as this technology continues to grow. And now, for the reason we're all here, I'm honored to introduce our panel of experts who brings perspectives from public education, technology, mental health, and workforce development. First, we have Charlie Ayers. He is the Director of University Relations at Texas A&M University, Central Texas, and brings more than 20 years of experience in workforce development and economic growth, connecting education, employers, and future career opportunities for students. Next, we have Kyle Berger, a nationally recognized K-12 technology leader with more than 2 decades of experience in Texas public education. He serves as the Chief Technology Officer for Arlington ISD, focusing on responsible student-centered technology use. Also joining us is Roy Rios, Roy is a licensed clinical therapist and director of prevention at the Texas Council on Family Violence. He brings more than 20 years of experience supporting youth, families, and communities around mental health safety and healthy relationships. And rounding out our panel, I'm happy to introduce Clay Smith. Clay is a solutions engineer at Google with a background in education and instructional technology. He previously worked with the New York City Department of Education and brings classroom experience and a passion for using AI to support learning at scale. So welcome again to all our panelists, and thank you so much for joining us today. I would love for each of you to take a couple of minutes to tell us a little bit more about your experience or passion. And Charlie, why don't you start us off, and then we'll go down the road.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Texas PTA, for allowing us to be here and for having the opportunity to speak to parents across the state. Again, my name is Charlie Ayers. For about 25 years, my experience was in economic developments, specifically focused on skills development and helping employers meet those talent needs. The last 7 years, I was with the Central Texas Workforce Board, where we administered career readiness curriculum across 30 school districts. And that was things like how to write resumes, employability skills, communication skills. And then as of last April, I came on board with Texas A&M Central Texas, which is in Bell County, but it serves that Round Rock, Georgetown, Killeen, Temple area. And so very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to learning something from the smarter folks on the panel. So thank you.
Awesome. Good to be here with you, Charlie. So my name is Kyle Berger, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer in Arlington ISD. Been working in K-12 as a CTO for about 25 years, and really my goal and pressure to really build out the equity and safety access of technology and to really bridge that gap between the way our students are living and the way that they're learning. And that's the big thing that I've been focusing on over the years is how we can really provide equitable access and safe access and prepare our kids for a future that really sometimes can be a great unknown for us overall. So I'm excited to be here with this conversation to help talk about this rapidly evolving area of AI and how we can really build into that and lean into building the future for our students and our society in a safe, structured manner.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be on this panel with you all. My name is Roy Rios, and I'm here representing the Texas Council on Family Violence, where I've had the opportunity to serve for the last 13 years. I started in the work to bring more safety to Texas in my hometown of Lubbock, Texas in 2002, where I worked in a community-based program and got the amazing opportunity in 2012 to come to Austin and work along TCFE. We are a statewide nonprofit that works across the state building safer initiatives for Texas, for Texans, families, and especially students. In my free time, I get the opportunity to work as a mental health therapist, working with folks who experience all levels of trauma and overall wanting to improve their overall mental health.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm Clay Smith. I'm a solutions engineer with Google. I was previously a classroom teacher. I've also worked as district leadership. So I'm excited to bring some of that perspective into what we do at Google with supporting artificial intelligence and supporting with education. Google's mission is to make the world's information universally accessible and useful. And when it comes to AI, artificial intelligence, we want to make sure that this is useful and helpful. So we're always working to improve and make things better for others. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation and chat with you all about how we can support and how parents can support their child with what is happening within technology.
Thank you to each of you for lending us your insight and expertise. We've heard about classroom realities and how these tools actually work, the emotional impact on young people, and how AI connects to future careers. So now let's dig a little deeper into what this means for families. And following this segment, we'll take questions submitted by our PTA members from around the state. But Kyle, let's start with you. What families are seeing most directly right now? How is AI actually showing up in classrooms today? And how does that look differently in elementary, middle, and high school settings?
Absolutely. I think it is pretty obvious for everybody. There's a lot of AI anxiety, right? Everybody's feeling that, from a student to adults, just this ever-changing world of technology that we're in. And that's showing up in various ways throughout our schools. And of course, it's going to show up differently in your community from one to the other. We have several schools that, have adopted mindsets of completely blocking, no access allowed, to some that are moving slower into it, some that are just wide open. So really, it can be different in your community. But I can tell you what the average look of what we're seeing is. And it's really quite different as you step into it throughout our education cycle. Primarily what you'll find in elementary school, AI is kind of like this behind the scenes thing. It's kind of invisible, to be honest, to the students. AI has been around, as you mentioned, and technology for quite a while. So the programs the students might be using that's guiding their instruction when they answer a problem, they didn't really realize that was AI. But where you're really seeing it is the teacher aspect of it, is where the teacher is able to really leverage AI to help them generate better lessons, connect to students in different ways, modify instruction. And it's really that tool that empowers them now to get back some more time to get that human teaching aspect back to our students. And that's very important at the elementary level. Then when you migrate into middle school, this is kind of where it gets tricky, but isn't that reality for middle schoolers anyways? Right?
Yes.
Interesting years. And so when we get to middle school, this is kind of like when you have the training wheels coming in. And it's because this is when they start getting more exposed to AI in general. They're having some interactions directly with it, and it's more apparent in the programs they're using. So they're inquiring questions to it, asking research, yes, attempting to get it to write papers and do some different assignments as well. But the teachers are leveraging in the same ways. They're helping to adjust the learning environment, now taking the data to see how they can adjust learning for their students and really make an impact with content creation. But this is a critical phase for our students because this is when in life outside of the schools, they're getting exposed to it even more. And that's where we have to really talk about, and we'll visit today more on the world in and outside of school and what AI looks like. So this is an important level to teach about AI for our students and really build their confidence. And then when you get to high school, we're getting on that career path ready, right? They're really digging into deeper research, really building out more content and discovery, coding help, really exploring ideas. And so the usage really takes a whole new level. And that's the same for our teachers as well. So you really kind of see that stepped approach that's happening inside of our education system and how we're working that model for our students to become better prepared for the usage.
Sweet. Thank you very much, Kyle. Appreciate that. Clay, before we go further, it may help to ground us in some of the basics. What do parents most often misunderstand about how AI tools actually work? And is there one concept that makes everything else easier to understand?
Yeah, I think just to kind of lay it out there, this AI, the generative AI that we experience, it's math. It's just math. I think we run the risk of personifying it or anthropomorphizing it in some way, where it becomes something that's human, because it's not. It's a mathematical construct. And I think that's an important thing to root and ground in, understand, to have conversations about. When it comes to how this technology sort of works, we are basically taking words and aligning them to numbers on some sort of a Cartesian plane, if you want to think of it that way. Think about words and how they relate to each other. The word dentistry may be related to teeth, and how close are those words packed together. And we're basically predicting the next word based off of how those words relate to each other. What's recently happened is the idea of context that comes around this. So if you can help me out, give an example. If we're talking about food, and I say peanut butter and jelly. Absolutely. Like peanut butter and jelly, we're talking about food. The context there is around food, eating, that sort of thing. Now, I hope you all know this because I'm going to change the context. And I'm going to say, we're going to talk about Elvis Presley. And I say peanut butter and banana. Exactly. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. So the idea of context is changing here. So that's what these models are doing. They're using this idea of weighting and context to do this prediction of word. Now, below that is an idea of grounding. And grounding is where we take information, root information, and we go ahead and search to find the answer of what we're looking for. Maybe it's just something simple as, what kind of dog is this? And then that answer is passed into this generative AI model that then comes up with a generative response that is grounded within that sort of information. Now, that grounding is really important because without that grounding, we have something called a hallucination. Hallucinations are where two things that seem similar get put together and are incorrect, or it becomes a false statement. So whenever we're working with generative AI, we want to make sure we are double checking. We are making sure that what it's telling us is factual and real. With what we do with Gemini, there are links as to where that information came from. But even so, we want to question a bit. We want to understand, do we believe in this? Do we agree with what it's saying, what the statements are? It's not what the generative AI puts out. It's what you do with it. If you choose to just take that generative AI and apply it just as it is without doing that fact check or believing it or aligning with it, then that's not appropriate. We want to have those conversations with our children to know that they're doing the right things with it. This is a transparency as we work with this. I think another big factor is within education, the quick and easy thing is to block and ban, just like you mentioned, Kyle. That's a quick and easy sort of a thing. But in doing that, we're restricting our students for things that they will have in the future. If you look back in the 1970s, we got the birth of personal calculator. It was $400. You can get one yourself. Math teachers around the world said, oh my gosh, my students are going to cheat with this. And they went ahead and banned and blocked that. Over time, those calculators got cheaper, and there was a lot more use of them in industry. Businesses were using that. Accountants, financiers, engineers. And so teachers started to realize, oh, we have to teach how to use the calculator. And they started off with just standardized calculators. I'm sorry, you cannot use a graphing calculator or a scientific calculator because that's cheating. And then they started to realize, well, that's also out there in college, in industry, and they need to know how to use those things. So we have to teach the use of those things. And we have to teach the responsible use of things. Mm-hmm. Kyle, I appreciate you mentioning the concept of the middle school and those challenging years. I don't know about you, but when you get a new tool for the first time and you might be, messing around a little bit, you could spell certain things out with the calculator when you put it upside down. You're going to abuse technology if you're not taught how to use it responsibly and taught how to use it ethically and transparently. When it comes to things like social media, we didn't teach that well. That wasn't taught in school how to use that. It wasn't the school's purview necessarily. And we all know kind of where that has ended up and what is happening now, where things are going, what needs to happen. So we want to see things that are happening with artificial intelligence, that we are locked up with parents, locked up with teachers, and with students, and that we're having conversations about it. How do we teach the responsible use of this technology and not just let it out there? If you went ahead and just gave your kids keys, said, here's your car, go, without teaching them anything, chances are it's probably not a good idea. How do we ramp up into it? If you think about how it works in our own lives, when you're a kid, you go to the supermarket and there's that toy car that you get on. It doesn't go anywhere, but you get that feeling, that ride that's taking place. Maybe you move on to bumper cars at a later point in time and you're riding around those bumper cars. It's safe. There's some risk, but it's not risk enough that your life and limb risk. And then we start to move into, okay, driver's ed. We have our parents teach us, our guardians teach us how to drive. We have that ramp up into a moment of a license. You don't just give a license and they just go. They learn with other ways. When I was a kid, I learned how to drive driving a tractor. Like that was my go-to. Didn't go very fast, but I could have done a lot of damage with it. But somebody was watching me. Somebody was looking at what I was doing. They were working with me with it. And it wasn't just me out there just riding that tractor the first time. So I think that with all of this and how this technology works, we want to make sure that we're working together to make this safe, secure, and possible for all of the students.
Clay, building off what you're talking about with cars, I think it is important because, we don't teach kids to drive a car to sit in a car forever, right? We teach them to drive so that they can go places and get out and learn. That's exactly what we're doing with AI. AI is that vehicle that's going to get them to that destination of their future career, their future paths in life. They determine the destination, just like the driver in the car. That's what we have to think about with AI.
I love that. I love that analogy, Kyle. And I love the, Clay, I love the AI hallucinations. That is something that I'm going to start bringing up with my middle schoolers. AI hallucination. All right. So now that we've talked about how AI shows up in schools and how it works, let's talk about children. Roy, How might AI tools like chatbots or AI generated content affect children's emotional well-being and relationships?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to think about, as we've been talking about here, regards to guardrails and being able to really discern information, is without proper guidance, young people could certainly blur the line between real human connection and simulated connection. I think in contrast to humans, AI bots are available 24/7 and are built often to affirm and to agree with young people. What we see is that if young people are turning to these types of tools regularly, it could skew the development around real vulnerability. It could skew their development around emotional and social skills, which is part of what we're trying to impart in young people. I think overall what we see is that AI can shape perception and decision making. So are young people equipped to be able to understand that information needs to be validated, it needs to be checked? And are they aware that misinformation could be generated based on the question that you ask it? Deepfakes, AI generated content also creates some risk for young people who don't know how to use it and who aren't aware of how to use it in healthy manners. So I think some core prevention framing that we could really think about is, and as we're already unpacking here, is AI is neither inherently good or bad. It really depends on the design and, most importantly, the supervision between parents and educators. And overall, what we see is that when greater awareness and conversations are being had around these types of tools, what we see is that protective factors are greatly increased.
If I can add on to that, just to say, I think it's really important to remember the human, remember the engagement of the moments that we talk to each other. I think students are turning to these chatbots for mental health because it becomes difficult as you're becoming a teen to talk about certain things. And those are the things where we need to foster a positive relationship with the children that we have. And we also need to encourage them to turn to a mental health professional when the time is of need. So having those relationships are key, remembering the human component of it.
Yeah, very much human in the loop is a critical part of this. And you mentioned something really important around AI bots, especially ones that are rooted in helping people with their mental health, are available 24/7. And depending on a young person's environment, it may be the safe zone where young people feel comfortable talking about really vulnerable topics, especially as you grow into adolescence and things start to shift. So this is a real call to parents and school communities to really think about how are we creating open communication and safe zones, as you mentioned. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about engagement, or parental engagement, and guardrails that are needed, and children being supervised. Kyle, we're going to shift to you when we're talking about guardrails. What safeguards do districts put in place to protect student data and privacy with AI tools, and what are the limits?
Absolutely. So it's really important when we start talking about this that there is a big difference between AI in a school setting and a controlled school setting, and we'll say the real world consumer-based AI. And that's really important to know, and a lot of people don't realize that. They just think it's all the same. The AI that we have and we're working within the school system is all working within what's called a walled garden. It's a closed environment. So the way AI works in general, in the general mass, is when you put stuff in there, your information, it's using that information to build the model, it's keeping it and all that. However, in education, it's a closed system. So when the student or staff are talking to it, that information isn't going out and feeding the bigger AI model, it's staying all right there. And then when I'm done interacting, it's actually gone. And so there's different things that are happening to where our students are being able to live and work in this protected environment with that. That's not the reality of outside. But there's a couple other things that work with that is, districts really have those bounds and responsibilities to ask these providers, how does your tool work? What is it doing with the information we put in there? And that way our students can understand that too. And then it goes to ownership. Who owns the data that's in there? And then you can even go a little further to where a lot of programs nowadays make it almost anonymous of how you interact. So example, Johnny, grade 10, is asking the question. The AI doesn't know. It knows Johnny has some random numbers. And so it's never, pulling that back. But when we hit the real limits, that's when the bell rings and they go home. And they're in the bus deploying the AI out on their phone or in the real world, we can put all these barriers and guardrails and protect them inside the walls of our school. It's outside. And that's where the education is so important for us. And that's why I think as we have these conversations and you have them within your community, it's all of our jobs to be talking with our students, with each other about AI, because the best firewall of prevention isn't a software. It's your human mind and how you're evaluating and using the system. So I think that's really important. We can protect you between those walls of the school. It's outside we really need to be worried about and mindful. Some of these tools are free. Mm-hmm. They're free off of your data. And so you need to be mindful of that when you're not inside those guardrails.
Excellent points and illustrations again. Charlie, how is AI changing the skills students will need for college and future careers? And when should families be paying attention?
I will tell you, AI has certainly moved us from the point of, the question, can you do this, to can you do this with AI creatively, productively, and ethically? Because it's permeated every industry and every occupation. In regards to how students should be prepared for college or for careers, I will tell you, even to this day, with the influx of AI, the number one issue employers have is people do not know how to relate to other people. It's the communication skills. It's the interpersonal skills. Every employer that I talk to, it's like, I need someone that can show up at work and know how to leave their drama at home and deal with their counterparts at work. And the thing about AI is it can give you some good solutions on how to approach that. But at the end of the day, AI doesn't solve people problems. People solve people problems. And so if families will begin to help their children understand what are jobs that embrace and use AI that maybe it's not so automated, but I can put myself in a position where I can become a stronger advocate or a better communicator or more creative. I think that's the real role that parents need to look at. And I will say probably many of us in this forum, certainly myself, not necessarily AI related, but man, has it gotten nice to walk into a restaurant and set your kid in front of their iPad with Bluey while you have your meal, and they're not running around like crazy people or going nuts or stuff like that. But I can tell you there's a real value to, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but we just underestimate the value of network and communication and interpersonal skills. There's a value to your kid even having to order their meal by themselves and not being there absent, and you're ordering their drink and you're ordering their food and it just gets shoved in front of them, and then usually they're hacked off because you moved Bluey out of the way. I mean, make them interact, because that's going to be the most valuable resource they'll have going forward into the careers.
I absolutely agree with that, Charlie. I think it's very imperative or very important that we instill that skill into our children.
Well, we even see it on the college campus now. I mean, you can walk all over campus and people are huddled up in a corner and they're on their phone and it's just, I'm more concerned about how technology, whether it's AI, social media, how it's impacting our ability to build relationships, because there are a whole lot of people. As a matter of fact, I was raised here in Austin, went to McCallum High School, and most of the folks in McCallum High School will tell you I was given a diploma so I would leave.
And
it's like, just get him out of here. So there are a lot more people that are smarter than I, but I can tell you this: it's the value you often bring to the table is your network. And one of the critical reasons why I'm even part of the staff at Texas A&M Central Texas is because I've been in Travis, Williamson, and Bell County for like 30 years. And I might not know Clay, but I've got Clay in my contacts, and I can make that connection with Clay, and I can introduce those two people. And we just don't really teach that to students now, the value of that. That's another reason, I don't mean to preach here, But that's another reason why I think intramural and team sports are super important, because it's hard stuff, but you're having to deal with others and work with others to achieve that goal. And so that's a real key component that's missing. I know that's really old school nowadays, but you can ask any employer in Central Texas and they'll tell you that's a major skill set that we're missing.
I think you brought up something really important there about creativity.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about the networking and that engagement, the ability to speak with others, have that communication, it's back to that human. What are the skills that are of value?
That's right.
And I think what has been lost as technology has become more ingrained within our society is our values. What do we value as humans? There are things that AI can do that are very simple: synthesize information, regurgitate information, create things. But what's more important is to be human and connect as humans. Right. I think we lost a lot when a lot of the arts programs got cut because we lost a lot of creativity. Not everybody's cut out for sports, but there are other ways and other outlets to create that sort of networking. I come from an arts background, and I've had multiple career shifts because I've been able to have the conversation, to speak, to reinvent myself, to be a self-taught learner, and take ownership of things.
Right.
So I love that you're bringing up the idea of creativity. How do we build those intramural programs? How do we build artistry within our work? Things that AI can't do.
Well, and there's so much of AI that is rooted in creativity, because it's not, I know it sounds easy, but it's not just getting on there and giving a prompt. You need to know what to ask, and then what's the next question after that, and how do you spin that to work with what you're wanting to do. So parents really need to start teaching their kids, how do I use AI as a collaborative partner and not just a know-it-all? I mean, how do I really get out of that what I want? And go along with what Clay was saying, I think we just assume this is part of folks raising their children, but it's not. Parents really need to focus more and more, with the way technology is changing, on teaching ethics at home. I think most of the time they're like, oh, well, the school district's doing that, and we put a lot on the school district. But I mean, that needs to be modeled in the home, and that's going to be your biggest guardrail for AI, because you're going to know where the boundaries are, and you'll know that going in. But that creativity and ethics are two key important things, even in their pursuit of career and education.
Yeah. It comes across like, really, it's the human element.
That's right,
folks. It's that human element. AI is the starting line. It's not the finish line. So it's the starting line to you're asking the questions, you're researching. It's not the end. So that's the important thing to realize.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. Love to hear all this. Clay, can I go back to you on something from the technology side? How do companies think about safety, age appropriateness, and privacy in the tools children may be using?
No, I really appreciate that. I think privacy is a big part. Like Kyle was saying, there are tools that schools can use to support what is happening with artificial intelligence, that make sure that things are private. Nobody at the big companies really wants all of that privacy data. We want to make sure that children are safe. We want to make sure that they're secure. Where we think about it, we're thinking about perspective globally. How do we make sure around the globe that we're supporting this? I think we also need to think about the fact that everybody around the world has this, and we need to make sure that everybody is upskilling in this new technology at a reasonable pace. So locking and banning is not quite appropriate. So we have to be responsible in the sense of making sure that things are private. When it comes to the safety element, we also need to make sure that things are safe within reason. From Google's standpoint, Google doesn't want with schools to be like the oversight and you can or can't do this. Everybody has different ways about what is okay and what is not, what's appropriate and what's not. It's different in different cultures. Every culture has a different perspective of those pieces. And we really rely on the school systems to engage with other partners to ensure that there's greater, more granular safety. At the same time, we have to take a stance at a broad level of safety. These tools should not be providing information about how to commit suicide. They shouldn't be providing information that is illegal within the community that is like federal, state laws at that level. So we've enacted certain layers within the tool. There are adapter layers that are at least listening for any of those triggers and then responding with banner warnings to say, hey, this may be inappropriate and illegal. And then it does a redirect. Hey, have you thought about doing it this way or doing it another way? We're certainly not in a position to provide mental health advice. We're not in the position to provide any of that sort of thing. We are in the position to help guide and direct, and it really is up to the schools to get that more granular piece in there. We've made sure that we are HIPAA compliant, that we are compliant with a lot of the broader policies. Our terms of service are bound by law to make sure that we are keeping things private. And we're trying to do everything that we can in the right way within the school setting for all that to apply. I think when we're a parent, we also have our students on their own accounts. Those are things that you need to be transparent with them. They need to be transparent with you. You have to have the conversations. If there's not an openness, students will tend to hide. They'll find secrecy because they don't know how to approach those conversations. And that's really a cry for help within whatever the ecosystem of the family dynamics are.
That really brings to mind a concept that we talk about quite a bit at TCFE called digital hygiene, and where you're really being mindful of what you're putting into the device, the consequences of uploading a certain photo or certain information, and understanding that digital hygiene is something that you have to teach at home and something that is part of those ethics that you're really ingraining in your community at home and even in your school community. But you have to have the active conversation. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Roy, will you continue with that? A little bit of the digital hygiene, I believe. Parents at home, what warning signs should they look for in how technology is affecting their child, or especially how it's negatively affecting their child?
First and foremost, I think one of the most important key protective factors and prevention concepts here is we don't need to wait before there are warning signs to be having these conversations. Prevention is really key here. But there are some warning signs. I think one of the key things that we look for is, are young people turning to this for comfort, advice, and really trying to build their identity around these types of tools or be informed by these tools? These are huge red flags to think about. What we also see is that young people who experience mood dysregulation when there are limits set, it's a big red flag that something maybe amiss here. There may be a dependency growing or a lack of boundaries. So think about how much time young people are spending with their devices. And something that you mentioned, Clay, is around secrecy. Is there a level of secrecy? Are screens hidden when you come in the room? Is there transparency of what young people are doing in their devices? Overall, what we want to be thinking about is there a level of emotional dependence growing between a young person and the devices that they're using, the platforms they're using? There's a lot of tools out there, tools that are being marketed to young people as AI friends and relationship bots. And these types of tools are built for engagement, not necessarily for the safety of young people. So are young people neglecting their real world responsibilities? And something I think that we've all kind of hit on here is, are young people able to develop interpersonal relationships? What do those interpersonal relationships look like? And I think on a flip end is, how are their friends using it? Because I think you also may be having some really robust conversations at home and in your schools, but their friends also need to be having those conversations. And so you also have to kind of think about the circle that young people may be in. Are they also getting information? Because that could also pose a great risk to young people if their entire communities don't have those same kinds of ethics. I think another key thing here is something that we've seen quite a bit in the news is the development and generation of risky content. Are young people aware of the type of content that can be generated by them uploading their face to certain platforms? And there are laws in Texas, there are laws around the country that really are trying to inform this. But what we see is that deepfakes and other AI type tools can have a huge risk and reputational risk on young people. So again, let's not wait for these types of things. Let's start the conversations now. It starts by modeling that healthy behavior and healthy use of AI, because young people are certainly looking at us adults, how we're using it, and they're going to kind of top us from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, Roy, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was getting ready to insert, we're addressing students here, but one of the pieces of advice should be parents look in the mirror, because you've got the TV on and you're in your phone and the family's all sitting around, and there is such a thing as modeling. And even to this day, the workforce is changing so fast. I don't have the latest data on it, but a good number of young people go into careers that their parents were in. But that's because they see that, they're raised with that, and that's familiar to them. So if they're spending hours and hours on screens and they're going off and locking themselves in a room somewhere, that's just a bad path to start down anyway, because the next thing you're going to do is you're going to be calling your public school saying, why can't you get my kid under control? And it's like, well, they're being taught at home how to handle the technology. So that's a critical point. Modeling is a thing.
And Roy, if I can actually ask you a question. You mentioned mood dysregulation, certain symptoms and things that we can see in there. What can a parent do if they are experiencing that? Is there certain steps that they can take? What would you recommend or point towards?
What I'm really thinking about is there needs to be some sort of intervention. And I think it starts by modeling those key things and having information. I think connecting with a mental health professional is really important, because I think mood dysregulation could be a sign of something greater. But as we see the type of dependence and engagement growing, what needs to happen is real conversations where parents are able to have vulnerable spaces where young people can really express what they are getting from their devices, from these environments, and be able to connect that to real world. So, I think baseline, what it starts with is, what kinds of conversations are you having at home? Are you able to be open about the types of things that young people are searching for information on? And if you can, there could be a really good opportunity to lean into your school social worker, to lean into the support of a mental health professional who can help you build some real-time regulation skills, and also assess, is there a greater need here in terms of mental health needs and an overall just culture within the young person? Thanks.
Awesome. Kyle, as parents are engaging at home and watching, and as they extend out and engage with schools, what questions should they be asking their school district about their AI use right now?
Absolutely. So, you don't have to be an AI expert, to ask thoughtful, practical questions about what your child's doing at school. And that's the first step in the collaborative nature of how we want to work. So I think one of the key things to ask is a pretty simple one, is what AI tools are approved for my child to use in school? So let's just find out what is being used. So it's a big, basic, simple question to ask. And then we can kind of ask, what guidance is my student being given within that tool on how to use it? Is it just on and they can go to it? Or is there anything to teach them how to actually use that appropriately? And so that's another concept of it. And then what is the purpose of the AI? And is it there to support thinking and learning, or is it there to replace all of their critical thinking? What aspect of the learning process are you looking to address with the AI? And I think those are just some key things. Just find out, what is our adoption? What are we doing with it? What's the intent? And how is my child expected to use that? So we can kind of see those bounds so that we can then support our children at home too. If they're using an app at home, we'll know that's the appropriate app to use or not. There's new ones every day. And so I think just having those conversations would definitely help and give that holistic approach for us.
Awesome. Thank you. Charlie, regardless of the career path and we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but regardless of the career path that a child may decide to pursue, what can families do right now to help kids build the kind of skills that AI can't replace? And I know you touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah. And I think all of us have hit on that. And I hope, if nothing else, certainly the value of social skills has come out of this, because that is a huge missing component even now. But that's exactly right. And I would say, to be more specific, plan a creativity time with your kids. Everybody sit down and do a vision board or build a Lego. Do those types of things together and help them with that interaction. Like I said, there's no one that uses technology or AI any more than I do, but there's real value to learning how to work with someone in completing something and making it a successful. Education is changing so rapidly because, when many of us in here were going through school, it was really all about memorization. Read chapter 5, and then we're going to have some questions on chapter 5. But now it's moved to, project-based learning, competency-based learning, because we're learning that those things are of value. But anything that parents can give kids as far as that time with them and helping them learn how to interact and learn how to, use their problem-solving skills, even those skills are going to help when they get into a career and AI is going to be one of their major tools. They're still going to need to know those problem-solving skills, and they're also going to need to know how to relate to the person in the cubicle next door. So that's I don't know that we could probably spend all day just talking about that because it's just very, very undervalued.
As parents teach those skills to their children, Roy, how can parents also talk with their children about AI in ways that help builds trust and healthy boundaries rather than fear?
I think this builds off of kind of your question too, Clay, around what can parents do. And, I think a really important thing is to lead with curiosity rather than control. Because as we've mentioned here quite a bit, young people are going to use these tools. And if we build boundaries that are rooted in control, young people are going to push those boundaries and find a way around them, especially when they're away from their parents' control. So I would suggest starting with framing boundaries as care. It's a partnership between parents and young people to really build understanding around these new and evolving tools. And something that I think, Charlie, you mentioned is around critical thinking. We must be able to help young people validate the information that's coming through these tools. These tools are built on patterns, not necessarily lived experience like young people and their parents. And so teaching critical thinking skills is critical to ensuring that young people have that discernment between what is appropriate, what is real, and goes back to that education thing where we're checking our sources, essentially. The other key component is review privacy and data information with your young people. Make this part of your culture where you look at privacy policies and what is happening with your data when you put it in there. That way people understand exactly what you're asking these tools to do. And overall, what I think this underscores is promoting AI literacy. How do we teach ethics, bias awareness, and how algorithms are influenced by the information that we put into these tools? And these conversations should overall be integrated into schools, homes, and other spaces where young people are gathering in community-based organizations. And I also think when we are talking about this, we also have to kind of think about the developmental stage of young people. Younger people are going to need much more boundaries and understanding around how these tools are used and much more parental supervision and work with their parents to really understand the risks and learn how to use these with ethics and appropriate boundaries. When we're talking about young people are in developmental stages where they may be less likely to think about the long-term impact of the information that they're leaning into and opt more for the immediate meaning of the information. So depending on the young person that you're working with, are they a teen or are they an adult or an adolescent, I think you have different developmental things that you have to be thinking of, from just the basic, how do I use this, to the bigger issues around how does this affect my identity? What does this tell me about who I am as a person and how I'm growing? I think overall, some really key framing here and how to build the protective factors is something that we've been mentioning here, is how do we build stronger offline culture and stronger relationships where we normalize questioning digital content. the information that's generated through these tools is not always fact. And often, depending on how we put the information in there, it can come back as misinformation. And what we see is young people, adolescents in particular, may be less likely to question that. So let's have those conversations now.
Excellent.
Can I go back to the privacy policy? So I love the idea of reviewing the privacy policy with the parent. I don't know about you, but when I get one of those pop-ups, I click the box and I just move on.
Yeah.
That's a great moment to stop for a moment, get that information, and even leverage AI to get that reviewed. And take the privacy policy, throw it into Gemini or Notebook LM, and ask the questions that you might be concerned about. That can be a great modeling use of AI before you're actually diving into whatever that application is. What data and information are they wanting? What are they going to use it for? And are you really safe and private?
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. It's all about having those conversations, and you can do it in relation to AI. When your children are using AI, you can ask them, well, what did you type in there to get that? How did you get that? What did it say? What do you think about that response? So you can engage those conversations around to get them thinking more about, well, this is how I put that in there. What's another point of view you think? Let's ask it a different way. And just having those conversations with your kids, I think will really open up their thought process on how they're interacting with the application.
I think what we see is that children don't need perfect technology. They need strong human relationships where they just really lean into how to discern the information and how to use these tools in safe and effective ways where they can build on their futures with them.
Excellent. Clay, looking ahead in a few years, how do you expect AI tools used by students to change? And what should families be prepared for without overreacting?
Okay, so here's the tough part. Things are changing rapidly. They're happening really fast. We happen to be in Austin right now, where it's so cool to see autonomous cars driving around. And one of the things that we've chatted briefly about is the idea of in the next few years, how often or how common is it going to be for students to get a driver's license if there are cars that can autonomously drive? So I think with what is happening with artificial intelligence and how this is becoming proliferated throughout society, we need to start to rethink and reimagine what it's going to look like. So all of the companies are trying to go for something called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Today, the models that are built are locked models. They're models that are crafted and they become just that model from that time period. And then we layer on top of that other information through things like Google search. What we're looking to do, or what companies are looking to do, is to build something that can learn on its own without supervision of somebody else. We're looking for something that can perhaps, like you teach somebody to drive. If they can drive a car, there's a reasonable assumption that they can figure out how to drive a boat. So that's kind of the idea of artificial general intelligence. It can learn on its own in its own way. There's also an element of having some common sense within that model in how it responds to things. So we need to be very conscientious about what is happening in the growth of technology, listening for the new trends, the new things are coming out. Our students, our children tend to be on the forefront. They're the first ones to try things, the first ones to jump in there. So we also want to have the communication and transparency with them as to what it is that they're touching on, what are they working on, what are they engaging with. We're also going to see things in the form of generative worlds. Google announced Genie 3, which is a actual full world creation through generative AI. We have headsets that are out there. It's only a matter of time before students, instead of doing the games that are crafted by a gaming company, that they're creating their own games in their own worlds. And what will that look like in the future? So there's so much that is happening here, and we don't want to see this become another social media moment where the modeling isn't quite there, the education isn't quite there. We want to be having a lot of these conversations. We also want to invest in our teachers. Think about the educators that are in your community and at work. As a teacher, you're often not paid a great salary. You're often working very hard, long days. We all probably had our children home during the pandemic for a long time. For some, it was very pleasant. For some, it was a lot. Imagine having 30 kids in front of you, all having different needs, and from you as the educator in the room. Think about your educators and make sure that you're investing in them, investing in what it is that they're trying to do to support and help. They got into the profession to make students' lives easier, better, to educate, to make a change in the world, and support that with what is happening. Because I think they're the ones that are also part of the trifecta in what it is as raising a child. Because you have a parent, you have the child themselves, and you have the teacher, the educator in the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Clay. Charlie, I'd like to close this portion with you. What does current workforce data tell us about the types of jobs students are actually preparing for, and not just the jobs that we talk about?
Well, so still, first of all, it's important to remember that parents don't have to try to force their students to become AI engineers, because most students today, they're going to be entering careers that are infused with AI anyway. In Texas, the largest careers are still found in healthcare. That's because of all of us baby boomers, second largest generation born in America. Now we're all needing pills and doctors. But the millennials are the first largest generation born in America, and they're right behind us. So the healthcare issues will not go away. That's always going to be a driver in the state's economy. But then you look at any of the STEM jobs, professional, scientific, and technical services. Those are huge growth jobs in the state. All of those jobs are already AI infused as we speak. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that changes, because as each one of the panelists has said, it's changing faster than we can keep up with. But I would say that all of the concepts, all of the thoughts and ideas that we shared are all going to be integral in any of the careers going forward, because it's going to be very much all about technology.
Thank you very much. Heidi, I think we have time for a question submitted by our members.
We do. And this has been a really great discussion. I'd love to keep going. We know AI brings both excitement and real questions for families. So we are glad to ask this question, which was submitted by a PTA member. This question is for all of you. If each of you would help us wrap up by taking a minute to respond to this question. When it comes to AI tools that minors may access, what guardrails matter most? How should responsibility be shared among parents, schools, companies, and policymakers? And they'll really have touched on this quite a bit already this afternoon, but Clay, would you like to get us started?
Thinking about the mattered most part, because that can be tricky. And I think it also depends on the age, as we were talking about those different levels of development that go on there. So I think it's not a simple answer to just say like, this is just safety. Because for some, it could be privacy that's most important.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it goes with a conversation between yourself and your child and other experts that are around you, your school and industry, to determine what it is that you're using. What are you using it for? What's the intention, as Kyle was mentioning? We want to make sure that we're using technology for the right reasons and that we also have the values that are in place there. I don't know that there's a direct specific piece there when we think about what is the most important there, but certainly around this, it's responsible use. I think the ethics, as Charlie was mentioning, I think is a key, because that's how we determine if our privacy is maintained, if we are being safe, if we're doing the right thing. And that's different for every community, every family.
Agreed. Roy?
Something that I'm going to go back to here is a term that we use at the council a lot, which is digital hygiene. And we started using this concept back when social media was emerging, and we were going around the state talking about the risks of social media for young people and adults. And I think the concept of digital hygiene is all about what you're putting in and what you're getting out, and really understanding the risks behind that. And I think this simple concept can be applied to technology as it continues to evolve at a pace that we often can't even keep up with. So by ingraining that ethic into your home conversations and to your school communities, you're offering baseline skills to young people and to the adult communities around, where they have this discernment to think about, what am I putting into these platforms? What are they doing with my information? And what are the risks when my friends are using this type of information? I think this is an excellent opportunity for school communities, policymakers, adults, community-based organizations to be coming to the table and really thinking about how these tools, and tools that will be emerging over time, as you've shared, Clay, how these tools are going to impact the development of young people across the board.
Thank you, Roy. Charlie?
Well, I agree with Roy and Clay. It's much too complex to try to answer all that in whole. My opinion, the way I would leave it is, if you had to choose one area to really focus guardrails on, parents, the buck stops with you.
Right.
We've gotten too much into a habit of shipping our kids off and hoping someone else will take care of that, or that's going to be tended to by an entity, or maybe the state capitol make a decision that'll make it. I mean, parents, take control of your kids' lives, be their counselor, be their coach, be their preacher, be their teacher. I mean, just take hold of your lives. And more than ever, and this is not a shameless plug, but more than ever, this is why PTAs across the state need parents involved in their local schools, because that's where the rubber meets the road. You have an opportunity to make a difference, to have a voice, and to interact with your teachers, your administrators. And I think that's the most critical thing, because at the end of the day, your kids are coming back home to you. So you've got to be the one to kind of make those judgment calls and stand in the gap of the world and your kids. And we know the world's a nasty place. And unfortunately, there are people out there that don't have your kids' best interest in mind. You've just got to step up and do that. So I would say, parents, be that individual.
I agree. Parents should definitely be their child's biggest advocates. So Thank you for sharing that. Kyle?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to that shared responsibility. It's like I mentioned, those watching, you're taking the first step right now in learning more about it, being engaged in the conversation, because that's what it's important about. And that conversation, as we mentioned, it doesn't just stop between what's happening at school, it's what's happening at home, what's happening everywhere. As we mentioned, with the guardrails that are built, there's some that help us inside the school system, but this child's only there, a few times. The world is much bigger than that. And so we have to have those conversations. And that's where we can lean on our policymakers too, to really, how can you help address our students' safety in the real world beyond the walls of the classroom? What are you doing as policymakers helping us protect that and that identity and all these other things that are happening? What can you do to help us keep these companies in rapid development also doing it in the appropriate ways? Mm-hmm. And your voice does matter. And so ask the questions, be involved, and be a partner to really help the student be successful. And that's what we're all here to do.
Thank you. What's clear from all of this is that AI is a tool, and how it shapes our children depends on the adults guiding them. Thank you again to our panelists for sharing your time and perspective with us. And thank you, Rachel, for guiding the conversation so thoughtfully. Most of all, thank you to everyone who has joined us. Artificial intelligence is changing quickly, and it's okay to admit that none of us has every answer. What matters is that we are learning, we keep asking questions, and we stay engaged. That's why Texas PTA will continue to host conversations like Straight Talk. Our goal is to create space for families to pause, gather good information, and talk through complex issues together. Being a PTA member means you're not navigating those questions alone. You have access to resources, community, and a statewide network of families who care deeply about our kids. If you're watching this and you're not a PTA member, we invite you to join us. PTA is simply families, communities, and educators working together to support children and strengthen our schools. As we wrap up, we invite you to sign the Texas PTA Pledge as you see on the screen. It's a shared commitment to making sure AI tools used by children are safe, age-appropriate, transparent, and protect the student's privacy, and that they truly support learning and well-being as this technology continues to evolve. When you complete the pledge, you will receive a downloadable certificate recognizing the action you have taken. We encourage you to share your certificate on social media using hashtag StraightTalk26 to help spread the message and show your support for thoughtful, responsible use of AI in the lives of our children. And if you are part of a watch party, thank you for gathering in your own community. Some of the best conversations will happen shortly after this program ends. And we hope you'll keep talking and asking those questions and keep supporting one another. So thank you again for all of y'all for being here. And thank you for all of you for all that you do every day for the Texas children and families. We're grateful to stand with you.